1/30th of 1 second determined your whole round. 4.5 hours, 1/30th of a second. So it's what happens to the golf ball in the club during that interval that makes the ball go where it goes. It's the only time it gets instructions, which means everything you need to do before that has to be correct to produce the impact that produces the ball flight.
Welcome to The Golf Parent, where you get access to the best minds in junior golf. I'm your host, Ryan Adams, and today's guest is the OG, the teacher's teacher, James Leitz. James is credited with influencing top minds in the game like Sean Foley, Chris Como, Mike Adams, and many more. He's a top 50 Golf Digest instructor, a top 100 Golf Magazine instructor, and he's proud to be the only instructor who's also in the top 100 as a club fitter. He's an expert in all things technology, 3D analysis, ball flight analysis. He's credited with bringing technology into the game of golf and is one of the first and leading world experts in all things data and technology. If that wasn't enough, he's also helped 31 juniors win state championships. Joining me today on the show.
Oh, great, Ryan. It's always a good day when you get to talk about junior golf.
Well, that's definitely what we're going to be doing today. But James, you've got over 40 years of experience. You're a master club fitter. Your accomplishments speak for themselves. So I want to talk about one thing right now. It's technology, because you're the only Golf Digest teacher that's in the top 50 golf instructors, and you're also in the top 100 club fitters in the entire world. So you're in a unique position to kind of talk about how technology kind of started, how it's impacting the game right now, and what you see in the future. Maybe just take us through your journey to kind of be one of the forefathers in the technology kind of revolution with golf.
Well, I think it starts off, I'm 2 days from being 65 years old. So obviously I was born and started playing golf really by accident. I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood, and I never knew anybody who stepped foot in a college or stepped foot on a golf course. So for me to play was crazy. Found the game by accident, and had a scholarship to play at one of the top football high schools in the country, John Curtis, but I never played it down in high school football. I found golf in 1973. And as I tell people, I've been looking through a straw ever since, been golf at the other end. And what a blessed career that is to go 50.
How did you find golf? What was it about golf then? If you weren't exposed to it, if you didn't, like, what was it that first kind of, how'd you get bit with the golf bug?
Well, I think it started with, my dad was a mechanic, and we grew up in, like I said, a blue collar neighborhood, but there was a place called City Park in New Orleans that, had everyday Joes playing golf, and the other mechanics played golf. And they wanted my dad to play, and my dad couldn't play, he had a bad back. And so Mr. Earl gave my dad a set of Denny Shoot clubs. I mean, that's how Denny Shoot won the 1929, I believe, Peach. And he put them in the back of the trunk of a 1959 Chevrolet. And they sat back there, and we were clearing some property north of New Orleans, which eventually we moved to. And Dad opened the trunk, and I said, "Dad, what are you doing with golf clubs?" He said, "Well, Mr. Earl gave them to me. If I ever want to go play, I have them in the things in the trunk." I said, "Well, you don't play golf." He goes, "I know." He said, "They just sitting there." I said, "Can I play with them?" And I was 13 years old. And he goes, "Sure, I don't care." And I pulled them out of the trunk, and there was about 15 feet down the side of the road that was somewhat terrible grass. And then there was woods. I mean, thick underbrush. And I start chipping the ball down this little deal and down, back and forth. And then I get a little more aggressive. And then finally I made a swing. And of course the ball would go off into the woods. Well, I only had 5 balls. I started in the middle of the day, and it was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock when my mom said I had to come inside. I just kept chipping and back. And I would look for balls. When I lost my 5th ball, I would look for hours for one ball. And then when I couldn't find any, I cried because I was so upset I couldn't find it. And that was what, as the talent coach says, my primal cue. You're very blessed if you have a primal cue in your life. That something hits you so hard, it's all you want to do. And I wanted to get better and better. And in the 1970s, golf instruction was basically Golf Digest or any book you could find. And I was in eighth grade. And so I started the golf team at my high school. I pestered the principal to start one, and he finally allowed me when I told him. I said, "Do you realize somebody could get a scholarship playing golf just like football?" So he let me start a golf team, which I did. And I wasn't a star in high school. I was very much an underachiever. I mean, in tournaments, I had trouble breaking 80. And but I was shooting when it didn't count, in the high 70s at the end of my high school, and I realized I wanted to play college golf, and I wasn't good enough coming right out of high school. So I stayed out of college for a year, and then worked, saved money because my parents didn't have money for me to go to college, and I knew I had to get a scholarship to play and to go to attend college, which I did. I had 3 offers: Southern Miss, Louisiana Tech, and McNeese State University. And McNeese is where I chose.
Can I
And
ask you, James, what did you do in that 1 year where you took the time off to try and get your game to a place where you could get that scholarship? Like, what did that year look like?
well, I was out of school, worked on the golf course from 5:30 in the morning until 2:30, and then I would go take a shower in the clubhouse and play till dark. And I played literally every day. And the next spring, a friend of mine who was a pro at the club I was working at moved to Lake Charles, Louisiana, where McNeese State is. And McNeese State at the time, they had just finished competing in Division One NCAA finals at Yale. So I say I was on the team eventually, but I wasn't the reason they were good. They were really good. And we played all the Texas teams and every week in and week out. And so I went there, which probably was a mistake on my part because I had trouble breaking into the top 5 because they were so good. And then after that first core group, my freshman year, we won conference. When those guys moved on, then I was, more in the mix from that point on. But I think like everybody has dreams when they're young of being a tour player. Well, so did I. I wanted to be a tour player. And by the time I was 17, I had set a course record in a tournament. And, I thought all the wheels were oiled. I was going to be a pro one day. And I couldn't afford lessons. So all I did was practice and play. We didn't have a driving range at the course I was playing at. So when you hit balls, you really paid attention to what you were doing because you just didn't drag another one over and hit it. Back then, believe it or not, there were no range plans. This was in the 70s. And there was no instruction that was really any good, although I would listen to anybody who had something to say. And as I tell people, in the 70s, the information was so bad, we were putting leeches on each other. And, and it was just really bad information, but everybody was trying to help me and everybody was trying to help each other. But so you wonder how anybody got any good when there was nothing but bad information. Golf Digest was, again, probably the only thing out there. And looking back at that information, some of it was pretty good. Some of the best teachers in the world at the time were definitely involved with Golf Digest. So it was this desire to get better. I got better pretty quickly. Then I played college golf. I struggled to play at that level. And then what I didn't realize was that I had mechanical issues that I didn't know was wrong. And no one else did either. So here I was, as I tell people, I was playing Division I golf, shooting free throws over the back of my head. That'd be hard to do. But I was good enough to have a scholarship and play on a team and compete at least into the middle of the field, but nothing any better than. Then I realized, you know what, James, you're not going to be a tour player. I knew I wanted to work in golf. As I tell people, I didn't care if it was cleaning toilets at a golf course. I wanted to work in golf. So when I graduated from school with my business degree, the club that I had worked at for 7 years in high school and during college when I wasn't in school, let go of the pro that I had worked for, and they wanted me to interview for the job. So here I was, 1 month out of college, 22 years old, and lo and behold, they gave me the job as the head pro. So I was never an assistant a day in my life, 1982. my first week there, it was a club that had lots of engineers in it because Martin Marietta built the external fuel tank that launched the space shuttle to the into the atmosphere, and it would come down. It was a big brown tube. Well, it was made in New Orleans. Well, all these engineers, metallurgists, physicists, structural engineers, electrical engineers, were all members at my club. So my first week there, 1982, I was given an engineer lesson, Mr. Ray Lacombe, who's buried in Arlington Cemetery. Need I say any more? What an unbelievable individual he was. And I asked him to do something at the top of his backswing, and he goes, "Why?" The engineer will ask you why. And I go, "Well, Mr. Ray, because I do it that way." Well, I didn't realize that's the most stupid thing you could ever tell anybody. And he goes, "Well, how do you know if I do it right?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Ray, I got my eyes." And he laughed and he goes, "James, never guess what you can measure." 1982. I go, "Okay, Mr. Ray, I was a blue-collar kid. My dad was a mechanic." And I said, "Why?" He says, "If you measure a good outcome and you measure a bad outcome, if you measure both, you can reconcile why they're different." Why? So I went and bought a $2,800 video camera when my salary was $9,000 a year. So now I had a camera I was going to measure, right? Good shot, bad shot. I was going to see the difference. And so I bought this camera. Well, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I was trying to go about what Mr. Ray told me. And I realized I didn't know what I was doing because I couldn't see the difference from just a video. A good shot and a bad shot. Even if it was a bad swing, every once in a while the ball would go straight. So I realized that the measuring was much more specific than a video camera, but that's all I had. So I could see certain things and I would video certain people, and the cameras were nowhere near like they are today. And I went and videoed myself. And going back into college, I had missed the tournament in 1980, and I bought a still camera, and I had my girlfriend take pictures while I was swinging. And back then, you put film in the camera, and then you would bring it to the drugstore, and it would take a week to get it back. So I took 6 down the line, 6 face-on pictures, and it took a week to get back because I'd missed this tournament. By then, I'd missed another tournament. So I get these 12 pictures back, and I lay them on a table. I'm going to see what's wrong with my swing. I'm hitting 300 balls a day, playing until dark every day. Had yardage books, swing notes. This is 1980. You know what? I was getting my face bashed in. Now, they were good, don't get me wrong, but I was getting killed. So it was right in front of me. I had what's called throwaway, when the shaft passes your left arm. There was only one problem. Here I'm a head pro at a country club teaching golf, and I don't even know that's wrong. So I video myself, and I'm still flipping it just like I did in the picture. I didn't even address it because I didn't know it was wrong. Then 4 years later, I got a better camera. First person I video is me. I'm flipping the club. I used to be able to hit it over anything. We had a guy, Tim Graham, was on our team. He was an All-American, and we were behind a tree one time, and I hit the ball over the tree, over another tree, like 10 feet from the hole, and he has the same exact shot, and he hits it into the tree. He's All-American. He's beat me by 5 shots around. He goes, "How in the hell do you do that?" And I'm thinking it was because I was good. I didn't realize it was because I sucked.
Yeah, you're flipping your hands.
I was flipping. And so you don't know what you don't know, right? I tell people God had a different plan for me. So anyway, I take the good camera, very good, and I'm flipping it still. Now, this is 1986. I'm flipping it, still don't know what's wrong. Head pro for 4 years. Take the camera, go to a PGA Tour event, and the first guy I videoed was a head pro who had qualified. And he was leaning the shaft behind his left arm, leaning the shaft, and he was lagging the club. So look at the way this guy does it. I go, but I never heard of him, so let me go somebody who a name. Lee Trevino, Lanny Watkins. I went, oh my God. I don't do it that way. Now I'm 26 years old. Been playing golf for 13 years, didn't know I threw it away, much less knew that it was wrong. Hit all those tens and hundreds of thousands of balls not knowing. So I'm going to go fix it in one day. I'm both mad and also happy. I'm mad that I spent 13 years doing something wrong and not knowing. I was happy. I was just going to go fix it the next day. So I take my video camera. I'm waiting for the sun to come up. I turn it on. First swing, I'm going to lean the shaft, right? Flipped. Well, play another one. Flipped. Oh, I'm going to start my hands over here. Flipped. After about 20 swings, I realized I can't fix it by just knowing what it is. Very important life lesson. So when you tell somebody, just because you tell somebody what to do, don't mean they can do it at first. So as I tell people, I learned some of these lessons decades apart. So that led me, I went and watched other people teach and at that time, and I realized they were worse than I was. So this was in the 80s and 90s, and there was no information. It was all handed down like folklore. So the people who got really good, they didn't get good by accident. They had natural geometry that didn't break the laws. Eventually, I realized, if I ever finish my book, it's titled 4/10,000, my journey to 4/10,000ths of a second. And 4/10,000ths of a second in golf is when the club and the ball are together. It's the only time the ball gets told what to do. So literally my whole career was to understand why did I lose those 5 balls that first day? Why did they go into the trees? Why? And then really through measuring a good occurrence and a poor occurrence, and then getting better and better measuring techniques and better measuring equipment, I always bought the best thing I could find to measure, and not to make money, but to be better, to help myself and my students. And then all of a sudden, when golf came to measuring in the early 2000s, I was already there for 20 years. I wasn't the only person measuring. There are lots of people measuring, but maybe not quite how I was doing it, all of them, but some of them pretty advanced. So all of a sudden, I was like in all this demand for people to understand what I was doing, because I had 3D that measured the body, and I had force plates I got those later, but I had 3D and TrackMan in 2007. So I was measuring how the body moved to change club delivery. That was my goal, because I wanted to see good shot, bad shot, what was different. Well, I was measuring enough to where I could tell the difference. So the 4/10,000ths is the only time the ball of a second. So if you shoot 80, your whole round took 1/30th of 1 second to determine your whole round. You're 80. That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
It is crazy. 1/30th of 1 second.
Determine
Wow.
your whole round. 4.5 hours, 1/30th of a second. So it's what happens to the golf ball in the club during that interval that makes the ball go where it goes. It's the only time it gets instructions, which means everything you need to do before that has to be correct to produce the impact that produces the ball flight. I think as long as folks, especially now, morphed into where I'm kind of a teacher's teacher, it's like guys and gals, everything has to go through the impact laws. There's only 4 laws in golf. Everything else is optional. And the 4 laws are speed, path, face, and impact point. It's the only 4 things that tell a ball what to do. Everything
Okay,
else
one more
is
time.
optional.
Speed, path,
Face,
impact, face.
impact point, where the ball hits on the face. So Jim Furyk can be up here, Tiger Woods here, somebody down here, and they can all be champions. So whether now that doesn't mean anything goes, because the club, when it hits the ball, needs to be moving at a certain speed, a certain direction, in a certain orientation, and the ball has to hit in the middle of the face, or hit off the middle of the face in the same place every day for it to affect the ball flight the same way every time. So if people, when they start changing, everybody wants to make changes based on occurrences, and I only make changes on patterns. Until I see a trend, I don't change anything with a student. Students keep wanting to change after each swing, and they're always chasing variance. They're always one step behind variance. We're human beings. We're not machines. So this, all of a sudden using this technology to measure it at a finer and finer level. I've got $30,000 force plates that they stand on. They're dual, right foot and left foot. They're not talking to each other. It says what the right foot does to the ground, the left foot does to the ground. I have gears. We put 32 markers on the club and the golfer, and it measures within 1/10 of a millimeter at 360 hertz where the joints are moving. Arm straightening, how fast is it straightening, how fast is it supinating, how much of the pelvis sliding, opening, tilting. And then we've got TrackMan. Once the ball's hit, it measures the club coming into the ball. It measures the speed, path, face, impact point, all kinds of different numbers. So now when I look at a golf swing, I can look at all those numbers, and then I can decide as a coach what's going to help that person in front of me without taking Humpty Dumpty apart. Sometimes you have to take Humpty Dumpty apart, but I'd prefer not to give that golfer better impact alignments to make the ball more lawful. Sometimes it's just getting them to not do things that are wrong on purpose. I'll ask them, what are your concepts? Well, I'm trying to do this. I go, don't do that. That's not right for you. Well, I read it in a book. I said, well, the pharmacy's full of medicine that helps people. But if you don't have that sickness, you're going to kill yourself.
What an analogy. What a great analogy.
So if you put a blind person in a pharmacy, they're sick, then they're blind, they got a better chance of killing themselves than getting better. That's golf instruction on the internet. All those medicines are good. A lot of the information online, not all, is good. But you got to know what's right for you. And all this has just melted into this one spot. Never guess what you can measure. Every shot, when I'm looking at a golf shot, I want to know where the ball hit on the face first, because I want to know how that impact point changed the ball flight. Then I want to know the face and the path, what it is in relation to the target. And the face is not just right and left, but also dynamic loft is face. Less loft, loft of the club or added loft. And then path is both left of the hole, at the hole, right of the hole, but also path is down, level, and up. So path is a vertical thing and a horizontal thing. Face is a vertical and a horizontal thing. So you've got face, path, and impact point. So I go through and know how to change those for that given golfer to make them more lawful. And it's fun. It's not complicated to at least get them to understand where they got to go. It is complicated to change, or difficult to change. What's difficult in instruction is change, not doing the actual movement. Some of the best players in the world, it's not like the moves they make take more ability to do. Sometimes it takes less ability to do. It's harder to make a free throw over the back of your head than it is to do this, right? So I think that which problem is doing it different. You know how to drive a standard car?
I do, actually. I was lucky enough to learn how to drive on a standard in the winter in Canada in January on ice roads. I feel like I got a very good kind of an advanced introduction to driving.
Doesn't get any harder than that. I learned in Louisiana where it's flat as a board and we don't have ice.
Yeah.
And so anyway, when you change someone, changing a motor pattern is not just understanding what you have to change. Remember me flipping the club, I just was going to go change it.
Sure.
Knowing what to do won't fix you. It's the first step. So I tell people all the time, number one, golf is mean. Number two, golf physics never takes a day off. Number three, golf is terrible at partial credit. So you could do a lot of things right and not get paid. So think of the golf swing as a 10-step math problem. If you got 5 steps wrong, you got the wrong answer. What if I fix one of the wrong steps? What do I have? Wrong answer.
Still a wrong answer. Yeah.
What if I fix 2 wrong steps? Wrong answer. 3. So when I fix things, that doesn't mean you're going to knock the paint off the flag. When I fix 2 things, if you've got 5, 6, 7 things to fix, you're not getting paid until you get them all. When people understand that, they get more patient with themselves and me. Because people think, that's why husbands can't teach wives to play golf, because they give them one good tip, and that alone is not enough to fix the math equation. And the wife goes, that don't work. So they abandon it. And they go to the second thing, and that alone doesn't work. So they abandon it. And they're in this constant putting things in and abandoning them because it's only one of several things that have to change. Unless a golfer comes to me with this, and all I got to do is plug in that, it's always this multiple things. So that gives me back to the driving a standard. So if you've got 5 things wrong, some pre-swing, some during the swing, the pre-swing things set up, I could give you 10 of them because you're going to do them, and then now you're ready to club to move. But once the club moves, you got to be careful. You can never give anybody more than 2 things. Well, when you're driving a standard, there's 4 things you got to do: the clutch, the accelerator, the steering wheel, and the stick shift. So you're pushing one in, pushing one out, holding this one, moving it, and of course it doesn't go well. That's trying to fix 5 things at one time. So if you're smart enough to know what all 5 are, you trying to do all 5, you're driving a standard car the first time. So when it becomes when you're thinking of too much, but you got to change. So he says, oh, well, I want to keep it simple. I'm not going to think of anything. Well, then you're not going to change anything. So you have to change. So what you have to do is you have to break those things down. So what you do, when I give a lesson, if a person has 5 things on their list, they're going to do 5 things of number 1, only thinking of it. Then they're going to do 5 repetitions on number 2, only thinking of that, all without a ball, by the way. Then 3, then 4, then 5, and then go through the list again. I don't know if you've ever heard of the, where they go, it's called conscious and incompetent versus unconscious and competent. It means you're thinking about it and doing it wrong, and eventually you got to do it right without thinking about it. That's a motor skill.
Which, if anybody's learned how to drive standard, it becomes exactly that. It's painful at the beginning, and then before you know it, you're not even thinking about it. It just becomes second nature.
That's correct. The only problem is the golf club requires way more exact geometry than driving a standard does to do it.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you could be slow on the clutch, quick on the clutch, hard on the clutch, and still kind of be able to drive. In golf, if these things are fractions off, you're hitting at people's yards. Much more difficult. But when you're thinking of a bunch of things, you have to start taking these things off of your list and doing them without a ball, without expecting results. The problem is everybody thinks when they're here, that should make them a little better and a little better and more better and more better and have it. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes with a math problem, you're further from the right answer when you fix this than you are here. And when it's conscious thought, you got people into motor skill confusion. But that doesn't mean you don't have all 5 to fix. You got to fix them all. Doesn't mean you have to have a perfect swing, but they're matchups, and I'm not getting into specifics yet of this for any given golfer, but they don't get paid until they get them all without conscious thought. Because eventually, the more you think about stuff, the more difficult it is, thinking about the clutch. But then again, not thinking to learn doesn't work. We're not going to give somebody a pill to fix a movement or whatever. There has to be conscious change to be able to do that. And that's the challenge of teaching, which is what I love for that person in front of me. And so what I do is I have it on paper. So on paper, it'll list every one of the things we work on in a lesson. Conscious and incompetent has to go all the way to unconscious and competent. Might be strengthen your grip. It might be turn your left foot out. It might be hold your finish for 3 seconds. It might be put your left wrist in flexion at the top versus extension. It might be those kind of things. And to get them from conscious and competent to unconscious and competent, you got to go through what I call the dark tunnel. So the dark tunnel has a bright light at the end. That's the reward. But at first, when you go into the dark tunnel, it's curved. It's not a straight tunnel with a bright light. It's a curved one, which means it's some pretty scary places. You have to understand why you're making the change. Give you an example. A person with their head way behind the ball who does not have lag will hit behind it or hit it thin until you know what freezes over. That's the why. We're going to keep them more on top of the ball to hit the ball and then the turf. Makes sense. Second is to exaggerate these things one by themselves. Thirdly is block practice. So block practice means I take number one and I do it 5 times, and then I forget about it. Then I take number 2 and I do it 5 times and I forget about it. Then I'll work my way through the list and keep going through the list. People are smart enough to know all 5, so they're going to try to do all 5. But they put themselves into physical confusion rather than a standard. And what we need to do is get them off of their plate to where they don't have to think of their grip anymore, their finish position, whatever they got to do. And they start limiting how many they have left to do. And then when we add a ball, there's awkwardness and poor results. So what do you think people do when they get to awkwardness and poor results? They run out of the tunnel. They'll never see the bright light. And last is verification. They have to verify that they're doing what they think they are doing. Most people think they're doing what you tell them because they're trying to do it. How naive is that? Me, I thought I could just go out and lag the club. If I didn't have a video camera, I'd have just went and tried to push the club leaning and didn't know I wasn't doing it. I knew from the get-go I wasn't doing it. You know how huge that is? Even though I was trying to do it, I wasn't doing it. People miss that part of verification and they'll never get to the bright light. Because if you're not verifying what you're doing, you're just wasting your time. You're just burning calories. So in a way, that's the process. To change mechanics, they have to eventually happen without you thinking about it. Because this game's hard enough. There's enough stuff going through your head not to be thinking of 5 things in your golf swing. I tell people, I don't give checklists for life. In other words, I just don't want people to go, oh, you told me to change my grip 10 years ago and I'm checking it every swing. I said, no, once you do it 20 times where you know it's right, it's over here, check off over here. Now, it might come back and it's in the wrong place again. Then you can go through your checklist, but don't do it for the rest of your life because I want your mind clear once that club moves. Once that club starts moving, I don't want a whole lot going on. I might give you a backswing thought, a downswing thought, a transition thought to help you through. Some people need to have a thought even when they're competing. It makes them feel comfortable. Some people don't want thoughts. That's fine. You got to know who's in front of you, what you're going to do. So that's the joy of it. But all I know is it has to come through speed, path, face, and impact point. How am I going to adjust that club delivery by what happens before impact? And I think that everybody trying to look like Rory or look like this guy or that guy is a mistake. Even though we all have the same number of bones, our bones are different lengths and different strengths and different ranges of motion and different, flexibilities, and we're going to move different. That doesn't mean you can move any way you want because the game's saying, hey, I have these laws, you better pay homage to them. So my favorite slide when I speak to golf pros says, great players pay homage to laws they have no idea exist. They don't even know why they're doing it. They have no idea. Now, the younger players today know a lot more than somebody my age. Freddie Couples had no idea why he was good. He might write a book on why he was good, but none of them will have speed, path, face, and impact point in it. It's like, I worked hard and this and that. Well, hell, I worked hard. I didn't play the tour. You know how many people are working hard that don't make the tour? It's not about how hard you work. There are people that, Bruce Litsky, his caddy put a banana peel in his head cover during the off season to see if he practiced. He came back in January and the rotten banana peel was still in his head cover. He didn't practice one time, and the guy was one of the best players on tour back in his day. So lots of people didn't practice a whole lot. That doesn't mean practice is bad, but people think that just working hard means. Now, short game may be a little different. I don't mind people practicing short game ad nauseum. Full swing, you got to be careful.
Careful in the sense that you may be reinforcing the wrong things. Is that what
Absolutely.
you're? Yeah.
Absolutely. You have
Let's.
you have to, because look, shooting free throws over your back of your head, which is what I was doing when I was playing and I didn't know it. And so doing it a difficult way. So your mechanics, there are easier ways to do a lot of things. Like if I shoot free throws over the back of my head, let's say I make 1 out of 10, which is not bad, right? And let's say I practice this a good amount and I can make 5 out of 10. You know what's a better way than this? Granny style. You know who made his players do granny style? John Wooden, the greatest coach of all time in basketball, made his high school team shoot granny style. He couldn't make his college team shoot granny style because it was too unconventional, except Rick Barrett.
In a game or in practice?
Oh, in a game. Guess where his best free throw shooting teams were his high school teams, percentage-wise, not the 10 out of 11 national championship UCLA teams. Did not shoot free throws as good as those kids because he made them shoot a granny style. So granny style is a better way than this. Pretty cool. So
Is it ego that prevented the players in college to be doing that?
It's the best way. It's the easiest.
But why didn't his other teams do it that way? Was it ego that they didn't want to look silly?
They already learned this way, and they didn't want to look in public to look like a granny. So they never did it. But he made his high school players do it. He didn't care what they thought. So the point I'm trying to make, but your mechanics are only going to take you a certain way. In other words, hey, the club face is way open, way over the top. We could fix all that. But when it comes to the small geometry, in other words, there are people with perfect swings look like tour swings who can't break 80. I'd show you guys at this club that have swings as good as Rory, but they're not as precise as Rory, and they're not as repeatable as Rory. But don't think, I don't have guys at this club that can't hit a forehand 230 yards on a string about 1 out of every 4 times. So the point I'm trying to make is it's the lack of precision and then the lack of variance under competition that makes success. And you got to have them. You got to have precision and lack of variance in a mental state to be able to produce them when it counts. And very few people possess all 3 of those skills. And that's where you get down to, look, every parent thinks their kid is special. Especially if they reach, kids breaking 80 when he's 11. Oh, he's going to be the next Tiger Woods. There's thousands and thousands of kids that are breaking 80 at 11. And what makes people special, for instance, when I get a kid coming to me and he hits, I never saw him before, and he hits about 6 or 7 7-irons, and that ball don't move in the middle of that face, that's special. You cannot have a roaming impact point if you want to play at a high level. Doesn't mean you can't have it off the right spot. In other words, I had a guy in here this morning hit everything about a half inch on the toe, every shot, and it never moved. Now, it had an effect on the ball flight, but it had the same effect every swing. But if you make identical swings with roaming, moving impact points, the ball will do something different every time. And this game's all about ball control. So the person who could put the ball in the same spot every time on the face, not everybody's given that talent.
Is that talent? Is that practice? Is that hand-eye coordination?
It is mostly talent. I'm not saying I can't move an impact point, but I can tell you a person who's not going to make it if they've got a roaming impact point. Hey, my kid is number 1 player in his high school team, average 73, but he's got a roaming impact point. He's not playing high-level Division I golf. And I was doing a podcast one time with Larry Raker, and I went speed, path, face, and impact point. And he goes, well, James, I was on the tour for 19 years. We never talked about impact point. I said, yeah, Larry, everybody who struggled with it wasn't in the room. They were over here selling insurance, trying to win their club championship. I'm telling you, I've seen tens of thousands of golfers in my career. It's not I got people who can put it in the same part of the face and can't break 90. They have face and path issues, speed issues, low point issues, injury issues, whatever it may be. So it's just one of the things that you have to look at. And that doesn't mean if a person doesn't do it well, you can't make it better. I can make it better, but when a person comes in and hits a half a dozen balls the size of a quarter, you better go teach that person speed, path, and face. They could be special if they can compete when it comes. They got a good short game and they can compete, state of mind, blah blah blah. All the other talents. There's so many talents it takes to be a competitive golfer. It's not just ball striking. You talk to enough tour players, they'll tell you guys in their career that hit the ball like way better than a lot of people the names of. I'm talking about college level.
Sure.
One of my dear friends, a guy named Brian Watts, he won the NCAAs in 1986, I think, 88. And anyway, he played at Oklahoma State, All-American, Haskins Award winner, almost won the British Open, lost in a playoff, then hurt his hip, and was never the same. By the way, you're only one injury of being nobody in this game. So these kids and parents better have a plan B. And plan B better be right behind plan A, because you're one injury away from being nothing. And I've seen it happen to many players. So anyway, here's a guy who had all of it. One injury took him off the tour eventually. And it wasn't like he was terrible and crippled. He was barely nicked, but it was enough in his left hip to where he couldn't move to his left side with the assuredness. And then eventually he started hitting loose shots and then didn't have the belief system that he once had. The guy was unbelievable with his own belief system. So an injury can knock you off. Family issues can knock you out of the way. Financial issues can do it. Bad information. People who are not people who can get a lot of information, all of a sudden start getting information, and that can ruin them. Or just the opposite, people who won't listen to the information and need it. So that's where this technology, the coach has to figure out what he needs to let the student know. Some students you start thinking of 4 things, they're lost. But if you have 4 things to change, the coach has no choice but to fix them all, because you're not going to get paid as you fix them. So that he has to find a way to do it without overloading the student. And the student has to be patient during the process. But the kids have to have such a skill set. Suppose they don't know how to eat right. Suppose their equipment's wrong. They got a driver that's totally not fit. There could be a zillion things that could be causing problems. I have a chart that has about 100 things on it. Reading greens, fairway bumpers, trouble shots, nutrition, club fitting, loft, lie, head design, spin rate, length, material, strategy. You've got, everybody has to have a yardage chart. They got to know their minimums, their maximums, their averages, their dispersions, their, dispersion pattern, where to kind of aim that dispersion pattern based on their misses, and then keeping track of that stuff to know that when it's in a tournament that it's not different than when you play for fun. I worked with Kelly Gibson on a TrackMan when he first got it, and Kelly, we were using Pro V1 balls, and he hit it 10 yards further when he competed. He sat there and hit balls on a TrackMan all day, and when he got in the tournament, he hit it 10 yards further. He just had more adrenaline. So all of it's just so many things that can knock you off of this track to go where you want to go. And the player and the coach has to know where that is. And it's a very difficult game to have good precision, lack of variance. It's just hard. when it counts. And I'm telling you, everybody possesses that.
Yeah, I mean, and what's unique about you, James, is that you've like personally helped. I think it's over 30 like national like junior state champions. What have you seen then? Like, was it the impact point? Like, was that one of the things that you saw all 30 of them kind of have in common, that they were able to just like hit the, on a dime,
No,
the
there's a
center of
lot
the
of things.
face?
Let me tell you something.
Yeah, what did you
I
see in
believe
common with all of them?
I believe in what's called threshold coaching. You're only as good as who walks across the threshold. Special doesn't mean you can't make a regular horse be a faster horse. I'm a donkey. I can only be the best donkey I can be. Doesn't mean a person comes in as a thoroughbred, but some people have athleticism and repeatability that the next person doesn't possess. I don't care how much money dad has, he can't give him. Hal Sutton was one of the best players in the country when I was growing up, and his dad had boatloads of money. But that's not why Hal was great. Hal had it. Plus, he was an unbelievable competitor. And yes, he had swing instruction, and look back at it, looking back, it was not the best thing you could do, but he was so good. I tell coaches all the time, I said, my cart guy could teach the top 10 tour players in the world next year, and 3 of them are going to win majors. So don't think, and I'm not ever got such a big head that I give greatness to anybody. If I can help them, if they've got a geometric bumps, in other words, a kid swinging 8 degrees in and out with his driver and puring it, and then he puts a fairway wood on the ground and tops it because he makes the same style of swing. If I can fix that, I've made that kid a better player without having to change his whole world. And so you like those opportunities, but they have to possess, we're talking about super elite, not a kid who can shoot 73s and 4s and 5s, which is great, by the way. But let them go back to when I played golf growing up with a wooden club and a balata ball that curved so far and curved, when you hit it off center, went so crooked because it was a lead slug right in the middle of the club head behind the ball, which means when you hit it off center, that lead slug wasn't behind the ball and the club twisted and it curved like that. Now you got this head
Interesting.
that weighs the same amount that looks like a piece of bubble gum blown up, and it twists, but not nearly as much. And no one comes to me now saying, oh, my driver's my biggest problem. Whereas I'm going back 40 years, everybody's worst club was their driver. So the game has changed, and there's no doubt in my mind you can add at least 3 shots to these elite golfers' scores if I put them in a wooden club with a balata ball. No doubt. And the ones that struggle with impact point are going to be worse. That's just the way it was. Now, I'm not saying that the equipment, I believe the best players from 40 years ago would still be some of the best players today with the same equipment. But definitely golf has gotten way deeper. The 200th best tour player today is way better than the 200th best tour player 40 years ago. No doubt about that. And so the game has evolved with the equipment. The game is involved with the instruction. And what these kids, all of them had, a couple of them lucked through it, but most of them had a belief system that not all of them had. As I tell people, I had 31 state champions, but I've taught 3,100 that didn't. So I was not the magic. All I did was put a little extra edge on their sword. They already had the sword. And kids you're not going to become an athlete by playing golf. You got to be an athlete and then play golf. So I do believe that playing a bunch of sports, growing up, hand-eye sports, physical sports, strength sports, gymnasts could be some of the best people I've ever trained. Never played golf before because they had such body control. So I believe all of this is all part of but when a parent comes to me and says, oh, he's 9, no more baseball, no more football, no more basketball, no more soccer, just golf, then the kid's not an athlete yet. that's a bad recipe. It's a
What
bad
age do you think it is prudent to specialize if you are going to specialize? If the kid is choosing which sport?
it depends on the kid. Let's just say this, not until they've become a pretty decent athlete with hand-eye and all kinds of other sports. I'm not saying nobody could be any good without that. I wasn't very, when it came to hand-eye sports, I wasn't good in any of them. But I started in every sport because of my sheer will. And, football's a game of will. I want to get past you to tackle him. That's totally different than being the quarterback and have to throw it over the linebacker, when people are trying to hit you. That's a totally different skill. I was a terrible shooter in basketball. I couldn't hit in baseball, but I always started because I was a pretty good fielder and had a good arm. But I wasn't an extremely great athlete. But then as I went through into higher levels myself, our number one player on our college golf team, Tim Graham, beat the number one tennis player in college on our team, on the tennis team. We'd go into a bar, nobody would beat him in pool. He was a good athlete. And he had no fear. You have to have competitive selfishness. You have to have a competitive selfishness. It can't be outward all the time, but it has to be inward. And the kids have to possess that. I didn't have that. When I
What's
was
a competitive selfishness? How would you define that?
competitive selfishness to me is when you're 4 under, you want to be 6, and you're ticked off when you don't get to it. Some of the best golfers I've ever been around are selfish and are never satisfied. If I had a daughter, I wouldn't want them to marry many tour players because you almost have to have that inner selfishness. I'm not saying all selfish people. Some can turn it off and on. I mean, you look at Scotty Scheffler. My gosh, does it get any better than him? He's not only a great golfer, but that's a great human being. But there's not many Scotty Schefflers out there.
No.
I've been around.
He seems to have struck the balance.
But number one, most of the Scotty Schefflers are too nice to be 4 under and try to be 6. They're grateful to be 4. You can't be grateful about your score. You've always got to be, you're either hunter or the hunted. And most of these kids will be hunter. Oh, I'm 2 under. Oh my God, I'm 2 under. That's going to be so cool at the scoreboard to post 70. But it's only the 14th hole. Bogey, 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 double, bogey, par. 76. That was me. And then when I was playing with somebody, if they were playing poorly, I was encouraging them. I'm just a nice guy. I felt bad for them. You look at some of these tour players, they want to beat each other's brains out. You look at almost any sport. There was some stuff that Jerry West was the All-American looking, acting basketball player. He wanted to cut your throat out. I didn't know this till late. Some of the stuff he said. So in other words, some of these people were super aggressive inside. So they didn't have that fear take them over. So when you go from the hunter to the hunted, it's when you're not trying to still hunt.
And you think that's inherent? You think that's you're kind of born with that killer instinct, if you will, or do you think it can be kind of learned or taught?
Develop it to a better spot. Obviously, results help that, but expectations can be too low or too high. But I always believe some of the best players I've ever been around had very high expectations. And, even Tiger today, you listen to Tiger today, he says, I'm going to play in the British Open and I think I can win. In his mind, he's still a winner. I'd love to see him win again.
Oh, it'd be great for the game, great for him.
On some level, he does it. But the point I'm trying to make is their belief system. And it's hard to develop a belief system. Kids do it as they get older. They get disappointed. They get beat. They lose a tournament. They come back with resolve and they say, I don't want to feel that way again. So that's what helps them break that next barrier. And how far they grow, we don't know. Some people start growing and, you got guys playing and gals playing at small colleges that eventually are on top of the tour. They don't all go to Oklahoma State. And all Oklahoma State guys aren't all the best tour players. At one time, they were the best at that time, which, that's a whole nother thing. So it's a really, really cool thing. Me as a coach takes the person in front of me, and I want to know about their game. I want to know about their game and their state of mind when they're playing. I don't get to watch my kids as much as I would like to. You can't. I mean, we teach lessons. I mean, I'm not around billionaires and zillionaires who could just say, you got these 5 kids to coach and you're going to be enthralled in their whole process. Doesn't work that way. I mean, I have to give 1 hour golf lessons, and I do it 5 or 6 hours a day, and can't leave to go travel to watch a junior tournament. I had a pretty big junior tournament this week, a state level tournament. My kids, none of them were over 15. They were in the 15 and under age group. First, second, third, sixth, and 11th in the state. And it was the overall division. And none of them were over 15. They were playing in the 17 and under overall, but they were all 15 and under. So it was almost the same results for 15 and under as it was for 17. I didn't give them that. These kids all have a little bit of edge to them. And the Jameses that walk into this building, he's going to have his moments. But I realized that I wasn't wired for high-level competitive stroke play golf.
What is that wiring? If you were to define it, what is that wiring? If you were to define it,
wired, I didn't have the competitive selfishness. I didn't have that. Belief system a little bit, but I was never even inner cocky. I felt I was turned off by cocky people, outwardly cocky people. I really didn't like. Okay. And then there are people that are inwardly cocky. And if you're going to be cocky, that's the way to be. You got to be your own best you got to be your own best cheerleader. Your self-talk has always got to be good. And you can't let bad golf do damage to your belief system. Everybody's going to play bad golf. The best players, they play bad, and it's either somebody else's fault or, hey, that's not me. And you know what? That's beautiful. But the last thing I was raised at was that it wasn't your fault. And it wasn't you. It was always self-responsibility to the nth degree. And in a way, some of the best competitive golfers have amnesia. And it's a great amnesia to have. And not everybody's wired that way. And look, I believe, I can get people's mechanics in a good start. But only their athleticism and their belief system can create consistency to create that geometry. And then only pure talent, or for precision of that geometry, and only pure belief system can allow them to do it when it matters. And if you don't think mental affects physical, I'll tell you a cool story, nothing to do with golf. In other words, your mental state, how it affects the way you move. A friend of mine takes asbestos out of buildings in New York City. He says, James, I got a 60-story building at the tip of Manhattan, the best view of the Statue of Liberty. You want to go? I said, heck yeah, I want to see it from that view. We're going up, and he goes, I just want to let you know there are no rails on the outside of the building on the top of the roof. I said, well, I'm not planning to jump, so I'm okay. So we get to the top, and we open the doors. It's a cool, beautiful, clear day. Little wind, but not much. And I'm 40 feet from the edge of that building. And there's the Statue of Liberty that looks in a room 6 feet away from you like it's 2 feet high. And I'm going, oh my God. And I'm walking really slow towards the edge of the building, closer. And I'm walking slow. I don't just walk right to the edge of the building. I get 15 to 20 feet from the edge of that building. I couldn't lift my foot to make the next step. If you don't think your mental state can't change the way you move, and when you move with fear, it changes everything through your system. And what's at the end is the golf club that tells the ball what to do. If you as a player, go to the hunted from the hunter, it changes the way you feel, and then it changes the way you move, which when it all comes unraveled, the way the club presents its way to the ball is different. You ever have a hole that you just don't like the look of?
Definitely.
You hit the worst shots you can
Always.
hit.
Yeah.
And the reason is, and I'm not saying it's easy to fix. I'm not
Or
saying
if you run into trouble in that hole previously, like you've hit it in the water a couple of times that you've played it. It's in your head.
And so we've all had it. You hear, look, if it means enough, if it's the last 3 holes of the Masters, guys that don't have this happen very often, all of a sudden have it. This, it's just, it is what it is. And so the ones that can play the best while this is going on within their body to produce enough, which I go back to being careful sucks. Doesn't mean you're trying to drive a green over a lake. That's not stupid. But what I'm saying is a careful swing. I played 4 years of college golf trying to swing smooth and careful. That was the 70s. In the 70s, it said swing smooth, swing easy, grip the club light, everything will be fine and dandy. Well, I was a high-strung guy. That's the last thing I needed to do. You have to move the club within your personality. If you think everybody could do what Hideki does with a 2-second backswing, no, I speed up 10 backswings for every one I slow down. And people are so careful. Being careful don't work. So if you've got a 1-and-1 shot to win a basketball game with no time left and you're a point down, dribble it, shoot it. Don't sit there and go, trying to be careful. You might miss it, just dribble, shoot it. But if you did it 100 times in the same situation, you're going to make more than if you're too careful.
It makes sense.
Careful sucks.
James, with for the parents that are listening right now that have a child that's engrossed in junior golf, is loving it, is playing, and they're wanting to do the best by that child, to give them the best chance to succeed, and to guide them on their journey. What advice would you give to those parents? Like how would you suggest, based on all the different parents that you've seen come in and out of your kind of orbit or your world, what advice would you give to give them the best chance?
I've seen the world evolve. I mean, you got to realize when I grew up, dads didn't go to this. Dads didn't even barely go to games. Dads didn't blow smoke up about how great their kids were. Dads taught us to be responsible no matter what. They were the bearer of bad news. Now, maybe was it too much that way? Sure. But growing up, my dad grew up in the Depression. Yesterday was his birthday. It'd have been 95. He grew up in the Depression. His dad died when he was 8. Different world. Whereas today's dad, and look, I have some great parents, and I have some parents that are helicopter parents. And if a person's too much of a helicopter parent, I sit them down and say, this is going to change and you need to go somewhere else. And because they're not going to help the kid. Parents do all of that out of love, believe it or not. They want to give their kids the best, which they think maybe being a helicopter parent is that. But what they have to understand is that, think of it from the students or the junior golfer. If they know the experience of being at a lesson or in a tournament is going to be helicopter parent that comes down on them. Do you want to go? Do you want to take your, guys who bring their 7-year-olds and make them play 9 holes? It's miserable for the kid. And I tell the parents, make it fun, and when you think that they get bored or tired, stop, go in and get a cherry Coke. Make it fun. And then look, the competition side will go. But when you've got a kid with some talent, and I got lots of kids what I call mid-range to mid-high talent. There are very few special. I mean, I got kids, I don't know, 100 and something, 150 that have played in college that I've taught. But special. I don't give that to them. And the parents just have to be able to sit back and go, what is my child's best chance to have the right state of mind for them to play in? And then specialization, practice until there's nobody, till they're blue in the face, lessons until they're blue in the face, tournaments until they're blue in the face. They never had travel sports when I was a kid. One of the worst things that ever happened to kids' sports is travel sports. Well, hell, all golf is travel sport.
Why is that?
They could play so much competitive golf. Now, there's a fine line. You need to play enough of it and get your nose bloodied to where you don't want to feel that way anymore and you play better. But then you get to the point where some of these kids, when they're 16 years old, don't want to play anymore. They want to go chase girls and boys. They want to have a driver's license. They want to be a kid. They're not all going to, no, not everybody can be Mark Spitz. And the parents need to find really where that is for their child. You always want to be positive on game day. That's the whole day, not just before they tee off. When they finish, you got to be positive. Unless the kid acts like a you-know-what on the course, if they're trying their best and they're cordial with the people around them and maybe make bad decisions, bad swings, game day's not the day to rub it in their face. They already know they made mistakes. But you're going to learn. That's what the next day is for. You say, hey, let's go stop here. Let's have this special meal that you like on the way home instead of making it this all the way home. Because then it's just going to happen again and again, and it's a bad cycle. I had 3 boys. Now, you don't think I thought one of my 3 boys would be tour level quality? I never started any of them. They never started playing unless they were begging to. And when all 3 slowed down from golf, it was on their own. I never made them practice, ever. And all 3 of my boys were pretty good golfers. My youngest was about probably a 4 or 5 handicap at best. My middle one was about scratch, 1 or 2. And my oldest was probably a +3 and had no fear, but had a horrible temper. So when he played poorly, or when he wasn't 5 under, he was the kind, he shot 64 3 times in high school, throwing clubs in person the whole time. We didn't know he was bipolar. The point I'm trying to make, he had the aggressiveness. Now, if he didn't have some of the other things, he would have had those talents, some of the talents that we're talking about, right? He had that ultra aggressiveness. He had no fear. And he broke his wrist his senior year in high school in football. And he was never the same as a football player or a golfer. By the way, when he shot 64, he was 6'4", 310 pounds.
Whoa.
He was a right tackle.
That's a big boy.
School. Yeah. And
That's a big boy.
He had no fear, but broke his wrist, couldn't bend his wrist back, could only go to here. And you can't play golf with that much right. You got to be able to do that with your right wrist. And so it's so many things involved in it. From New Orleans, it's a gumbo. So these kids' careers are a gumbo. Do they know how to hit bunker shots? Do they really know where they missed their shots? Do they know how to read greens? Do they, there's so many talents you have to have. And when you go to a higher and higher level, the one you don't have is going to get you. If you could be the best player in the state and always played on slow greens, and all of a sudden you sign for a big university, and next thing you know, you're playing fast greens or bent greens, and you don't even know how to play. And so there's so many limits, and then you lose your belief system because it's like, oh my God, I made everything in Louisiana, which our greens are like tee boxes. And then I go here and I can't putt. So there's so many things involved in a child's development. And the parent just needs to make sure the kids are having fun and that they're supported with the right people around them, whether it's a full swing coach, short game coach, somebody physically taking care of them, and just give them the opportunity and let it go where it goes. And I don't know, I just feel that way not only as a parent but as a coach.
Well, James, you're speaking the truth. I think it's all very, very important advice to hear as parents, and there's wisdom behind it. For those parents that have been listening to this and they're like, you know what, I'd love to find out how to work with you, James, find out more information. Like, what's the best way for people to find you?
Well, I'm at the beautiful Chifuncta Country Club. That's spelled Tchefuncta. The T is silent. In Covington, Louisiana. I'm a New Orleans boy. I've had my whole career in one county, and I wouldn't trade it for nothing. So we're about 30 miles north of New Orleans. We have a beautiful 2,000 square foot state-of-the-art learning center that's got the most, it's the most advanced measuring room in the world. We've got Kistler force plates, TrackMan, Sand Putt Lab, Gears 3D. We do it all, and we measure it all. And we get kids coming from different distances and so forth. And you know, I love working with kids. The kid I love working with the most is the kid barely making the high school team or making the college team, because I know what that's like. And the rest, you know, the parents, they have to kind of let their kids, once they get 15 or 16, it's got to be the kids driving the bus. It can't be the parent. And you've heard horror stories of the parent driving the bus so hard because they see their kid shoot a 66 and they think they can do it all the time. And, you know, they've ruined way more golfers than they've made great by being overbearing parents. I mean, there's more horror stories than there are success stories. And usually the best golfer at 12 and 13, you know, is not always the best golfer at 16. And the best golfer at 16 might not be the best at 20. And there are guys winning on tour now, then you don't even know what college they went to. So this development that's going on is within that person. But anyway, what we do on my website is leitzgolf.com. That's spelled Leitz golf.com. And it's got a little bit of everything of what we do. And you know what? There are a lot of great instructors in this country. And I really do believe that. And, you know, you don't all have to come here to find a great instructor. You got to pass a whole lot of them to get to me. So if you can find a good instructor that's close to you, that cares about the whole student, you know, that's the person to latch on, because it's really a relationship for a lifetime. I enjoy my kids coming and they say, Mr. James, I have 2 kids now. And my first junior champion in 1982, 5 years ago, played in the Senior U.S. Open. That's when you know you've been around a long time.
It's also when you know that you're doing something right. Listen, James, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insights. And yeah, we'll have to do this again. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Well, Ryan, I really appreciate it. And God bless everybody, those young kids. Follow your dreams, play golf for life. And there's no better sport.